I am Jason Abraham, the Shadow Teacher 33. In this book I'm reading, this epic book, Reality Transurfing by Vadim Zeland, is all about manifestation. It's all about the mechanism of quantum mechanics, quantum entanglement, using the mind, using intention, how our thoughts and beliefs intertwined with the reality that we're experiencing. And one of the components of this book is the concept of pendulums. And I've talked about pendulums in other videos before, but this concept of a pendulum, this is the term that Vadim Zeland uses. I would say this concept is similar to an egregore or even a demonic force. It's this idea of something that is not alive in and of itself. It's a thought form that somehow gathers enough energy when people buy into it and bring life to it. And the pendulum gains momentum and stays alive. It's called a pendulum because it gains momentum, and the momentum keeps it alive through human beings essentially giving up their thoughts, giving their souls to it. And the pendulum, as it becomes alive, it doesn't care about the individuals that are keeping it moving. It doesn't care about the individuals. In fact, it wants there to be no individuality at all. It wants its force, its life, to become the dominant thing, and the individuals that make it up to simply become this hive mind that keep it going, that give it strength, that keep giving this thought form power and energy and life so that it becomes unstoppable. And my channel, the Shadow Teacher 33 channel, I say it in every video, it's all about human potential. It's all about us learning to be more of ourselves so we can show up as our greatest version in this world, and then show up as the piece of the God spark that wants to animate through us and play with other pieces of that God spark in a very unique way. So giving our soul to a pendulum is the opposite value of what my channel is about. And when we're also looking at intentional manifestation, giving our energy to the pendulum is not about, that becomes about giving the pendulum life and giving the pendulum power, giving power to the manifestation of the thought form of the pendulum and what's associated with that, and taking away our own energy. The pendulums, when we start to give our energy away to pendulums, we unbalance our own spirit. That's the terms that Vadim Zeland would use. And we typically work against any kind of manifestation that we want unconsciously. And a characteristic, again, of these pendulums is they are not about depth. They're very black and white. The pendulum promotes this black and white thinking, and us versus them thinking. This definition of the individuals that make up the pendulum by defining themselves by external circumstances that are dictated by the pendulum, that are dictated by the thought form. And examples of this, they're all over the world. You can see them in political parties. Political parties are examples of pendulums. Sports teams, college rivalries, these are all examples of pendulums. Anything that we start to identify with, any movement that's outside of ourselves that starts to have these different characteristics. And then when people start to associate as being a Democrat or Republican, a fan of this team, a fan of that team, then There's an assumption that your personality is a certain way, your consciousness is a certain way. And when someone completely buys into this being their identity, again, this is where the pendulum has more power than the individual. And the pendulums, again, they're dehumanizing. They promote a black and white thinking, an us versus them thinking, a this or that thinking. But what I've found when we are tapping into our potential in the depths of our human consciousness, we find that we have a core identity that's very unique to who we are. But what I find is I'm always learning throughout my life. And I find that some of my beliefs that I believed were true, that I clung to, that I've held for, that I fought with all of my might, were stripped away from me. And then other concepts and ideas have shown up in my world that I never thought I would believe in, that I never thought I would participate in. So what I find is a healthy consciousness has a core identity of who they are, but they're also willing to learn. They're also willing to grow. They're very growth-minded. And so their thinking is not this black or white, this or that, us versus them. They're willing to take in perspectives. They know their core values. They know a core of who they are, but they let those values guide them as to what they're taking on. And then therefore they're flexible, they're adaptable. And what you find is old versions of yourself drop away as something new is born that's more in alignment with what wants to come through you, the person you're meant to be, what wants to be birthed in your existence. But when someone is attached to a pendulum, they're stuck. They're stuck to the identity that the pendulum gives them. They're stuck to this black and white thinking. And again, they are not nurturing their own potential, but instead nurturing and watering the power of the pendulum, giving up their power, giving up their own potential for this non-human force that simply wants to use them. And a good theme of this book, again, it's all about manifestation and our hitting our personal potential, is understanding how pendulums work. We understand how they work, and then when we're starting to buy into a pendulum, we're starting to get into black and white thinking, or black or white thinking, we're starting to get into that type of thinking, then we can change course. We can take a pause and realize that this way of being is not in our best interest for reaching our own highest good. And when we take that pause, we go back to this growth mindset, then we're willing to learn. We're willing to see someone we may have once thought as an enemy as another possibility of someone to learn from, someone who can enrich our own experience of life. And sometimes you can even turn an enemy into a friend with this type of approach and learn and grow in the process. And that's what this is all about. This is a journey. The hero's journey is about growth. It's about understanding. It's about wisdom. And wisdom is knowing that we don't know everything. True wisdom, as you start to grow deeper in wisdom, you realize how unwise you actually are, how little you actually know. And this is, I guess, the difference between knowledge and wisdom. Someone who thinks they know everything, that's a clear sign that they lack wisdom. Some people who think they've got it all figured out, which we see so much of on YouTube and social media. And my intent is not to be that way. My intent is to share my perspectives, to share my experience, to share what I'm curious about, to share the few things I do know about, in hopes that that helps someone expand their own consciousness and maybe get out of a dark place and step into the light of their own potential. So with that being said, I'm going to end this transmission. Be strong, be well, and I'll see you on the other side.